Okay, well, it's just kicked over 9:30 a.m. So I think what we'll do is we'll kick off on the meeting now. Everybody is here, I think, looking at my screen. Yep, we're all here. Okay, well, welcome everybody to this proposed alcohol control bylaw meeting. Just want to note that this meeting is being recorded due to COVID-19 restrictions, and clearly it's being held across Zoom. All members participating in this call will count for the purpose of the meeting, quorum in accordance with 25B of Schedule 7 of the Local Government Act 2002. And I think you'll probably all be aware at the moment that we're live streaming our meetings, and this is being live streamed across our council's YouTube channel. We'll just take our apologies for the moment. Councillor West has unfortunately tendered her apologies. She's previously declared a conflict of interest with decisions pertaining to the Alcohol Control Bylaw, and Councillor Plimmer has also tendered an apology. He has already declared a conflict of interest with decisions pertaining to this bylaw, and he also has a prior commitment today, regardless of his conflict of interest declaration. So if we can just make sure that the minutes note those conflicts of interest, please. Councillor Eames, would you move to accept the apologies from Councillor West and Councillor Plimmer?
Very happy to do so. Thank you. So
Thank
moved.
you. Seconder, Mayor Bain, thank you very much. All those in favour, please raise your hand. The motion is carried. Do we have any other conflicts of interest to declare? Councillor Eames.
I do have a conflict of interest that I hold a licence for the racing club, which has a liquor licence, but I don't think it should impinge on this. It's there's no financial concerns.
Okay, I'll just quickly pass to one of our council members. I think you're probably correct. If one of our advisors could just indicate whether that's appropriate or not.
Morning.
Morning.
Yeah, Councillor Eames, I think the licence that you hold is pertaining to the actual licensing provisions under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, and any alcohol ban would be separate to that. So I don't necessarily see that the two interests that you have being part of these discussions and as part of the club there would necessarily be in conflict. But it's entirely up to you whether you want to declare a conflict there and to proceed or not.
I just like, I understand, I agree. I'd just like the public note that I do hold the licence at the racing club, so there's no concerns moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Eames. Councillor Colenso, you have something to raise.
Yes, I would be in the same position as Councillor Eames in that situation, in that I hold a bar manager's licence, but I don't perceive a conflict of interest at this stage. Okay, thank you. I think that's probably quite clear. I think Ms. Yates has covered that. So thank you for noting that. Appreciate that. Okay, right. Now we've got a speaking schedule, which is great. We've had 3 submitters who wish to speak to us in person today. So we'll just run through what that looks like. Speakers will have 5 minutes each to speak. Following each speaker, there will be an opportunity for members of the committee to ask questions of clarification. For speakers, when you're at the 4-minute mark, our committee advisor, Suzanne, will just pop onto the screen and let you know that you're at the 4-minute mark. It will give you an idea that you've got 1 minute to go, and then she'll let you know with a T signal that 5 minutes is up, and then we'll have some questions. So first up, please, Aidan, I think you're online there, so we'd love to hear from you.
That's great. Morena, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. You've all read my submissions that I've put through, so I'd just like to probably provide a bit more detail on that this morning. My first question is to the committee is, why create another legislative process for an offence or a type of offending where there are already plenty of other acts, legislative acts, which contain offences and penalties which can be enforced by the police. In the statement of proposal, paragraph 3 states, fortunately our district doesn't experience significant incidents of alcohol-related crime and disorder, and there are no particular problem areas. It further states that there have been few formal complaints received by council, and police have no data on relevant alcohol-related incidents. There's another comment there that other options to address the problem would include police powers to protect public safety. And so my next question would be, so what is the problem that has been referred to, and can that problem be defined? The council states that the council could advocate for more local police, and which you all know, I certainly support that and feel that certainly more local police would help with the control and the prevention of alcohol-related crimes. From my 17 years in the police, I certainly agree with the statement in the proposal there that police prevent escalation of alcohol-related incidents. However, I would say that police prevent would add that early enforcement is crucial to the prevention of alcohol-related crimes. It says, without a bylaw, the council and police would have difficulty promoting and maintaining public health and safety by reducing alcohol possession and consumption in public places. Under the Summary Offences Act 1981, Section 39(3), there is an offence there with regards to possession of alcohol or by persons under the age of 18 years. Policing Act 2008, Section 38, deals with a constable who finds a person intoxicated in a public place can take course of action to remove that person who's intoxicated. The Summary Offences Act also has other offences for disorderly behaviour, threatening, offensive behaviour and assaults, while the Crimes Act and other legislation deals with much more serious offending. Para 4 discusses Toast-Martinborough. So if the committee is going to implement a permanent alcohol ban for Toast, how will you remove that if the event doesn't go ahead, as happened last year after COVID, or if the event holds permanently? How will the ban be rescinded, and what's the process? Another headline there under paragraph 4 states enables council to make liquor bans by resolution. So for Toast-Martinborough, why not just establish a ban by resolution as a temporary measure? If permanent bans are proposed, what will be the process to enact them? As you have stated in the proposal there, that the proposed bylaw is a reasonable limitation on people's rights and freedoms. Looking at the legislation which this bylaw would gain in its enforcement powers from, Local Government Act 2008, Section 169 refers to powers of arrest. Search and seizure, Section 169A refers to proving a substance as alcohol, and Section 170 relates to the powers of search. Territorial authority designating public areas 14 days before an event and ensuring legible signage is in place. I've sat in court on many occasions hearing submissions from police and defence lawyers before the excuses under the sun as to whether a container held alcohol, whether the signage was legible, and whether the accused could have seen it. It becomes a huge bureaucratic waste of time for police, for the defendant, for the lawyers, for the witnesses who have been called by police to come and prove those points. Marsden District Council have had a liquor ban in their central CBD for many years. Has SWDC asked Marsden how many successful prosecutions, or let alone arrests, they have had for breach of the liquor ban? How many people have actually been successfully prosecuted through the courts for breach of the liquor ban? Also, every year, Marsden District Council enact liquor bans at Castle Point and Riversdale beaches. How many people have been arrested and charges presented through the courts for breaching those liquor bans in those coastal areas?
Aidan,
Wellington City. Yes.
I'll just interrupt you. You're at time. How much longer does your submission run from? I'm happy to hear you go over a little bit. We've got 2 other submitters to go, but just want to know how much longer you think you might run for.
I just had 2 more bullet points.
Cool, go for it.
So my second to last bullet point was, in my experience, if people are arrested for breaching a liquor ban, they never see court for that offence. They are held in the cells until they are sober, then released and warned, or they receive a pre-charge warning. If the offending is more serious, they are charged with more serious offences. So I go back to my first question: why create another legislative process for an offence or type of offending where there are already plenty of other acts which contain offences and penalties which can be enforced by police? And if there was more police in the South Wairarapa, I'd imagine that would be occurring. Thanks. Sorry for going over time.
It's okay. That's okay. Thank you. I realise you probably can't see us, so I thought I'd better let you know that. Councillors, do you have any questions that you would like Mayor Bain?
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. So you're advocating that the council has no purview over trouble spots, and we leave it to the police and their Summary Offences Act and other legislation to control liquor in the South Wairarapa.
Mayor Alex, there are already mechanisms and measures available for offences to be addressed or offending to be addressed. I think, and because I mean, if you're going to bring in another offence, i.e. a bylaw, there wouldn't. I imagine there's no powers of arrest or enforcement action that council officers can take. So then it becomes default to the police. And I mean, the police have already got all those other powers. The Summary Offences Act and the Policing Act offences I mentioned, they're bread and butter for police as they go through the police college. And
I'm just checking that you understand that we're replacing 2 current bylaws with a one slightly more relaxed bylaw. Is that so we're not creating a new bylaw? Just making sure you understand that.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Eames.
Yes, Aidan, if I could just comment. So I understand the situation, but in the Featherston position, you would obviously agree with removing that bylaw because we do not have that level of concern. Is that correct? And the police can handle it.
That bylaw in Featherston was initiated when I was policing in Martinborough, and I shook my head as to why I didn't support it. I felt that there was enough back then in the early 2000s. I felt that there was enough legal course of avenue available to police to enforce the issues. I think that bylaw in Featherston was initiated by concerned community members about behaviour which was occurring at the skate park.
Okay, not so much the police.
I think the police hierarchy supported it, but on the street, constables who are working the night shifts or the late shifts in Featherston, I mean, in Martinborough, I felt that we had sufficient powers and practices available to deal with the issues when we came across them.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillors Colenso and Hay, do you have any questions that you would like to ask of Aidan? No,
thank you.
All right then. Look, I just will make a note while we've still got Aidan online. I was waiting for Ross to join the meeting, but Ross does not appear to have joined the meeting. Does anybody have an apology for Ross? No. Suzanne, can we make a note of that, please? Just that Ross is obviously missing at the moment. Is there anything else that we need to do?
No, unless he's put an apology in previously that we've just all missed, and then we can just put it in subsequently into the minutes and just not move and second it. We can do that if it turns out he has put one in. Okay, thank you. All right.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll quickly text him and see if it's an answer.
Oh, thank you. It's very good. Okay, thanks, Aidan. I don't actually have any questions to ask you because I think that they were asked by Mayor Bain and also by Councillor Eames. Really appreciate your submission. Thank you for that. And I will say, cool, I'll let you enjoy your day, and I will move on to the submission from Jenny Boyne and Alistair, if he's there as well.
Hi, no,
oh, sorry. Thanks, Aidan. Welcome, Jenny. Carry on.
Good morning. So, no, Alistair, it's always the we. Yeah, no, he's out chasing some sheep and cows. So good morning, everybody. You've asked for some feedback, and I think it's really important that we do in the community provide feedback. One of the questions was, do you agree with the problem we've stated, that there are more or less what do you consider? I don't agree with you because I don't think a bylaw is going to reduce alcohol-related crime and disorder. Do you agree with the proposal to include controls for one-off special events? We believe that it's too restrictive, and not happy that you've singled out Toast Martinborough. This is a company with shareholders, all of whom have gone through the process of obtaining a liquor licence for their own premises. They are not responsible for individuals' behaviour on the streets, whether driving or walking or holding bottles of wine or beer. The individuals are, and if they're causing a nuisance, then call the police. I'm very uncomfortable with your intention with this proposal, with the words, to enable council to establish a permanent alcohol ban areas in future where necessary. Agreeing to this could well be taken that we are supporting a proposal that gives the council a mechanism and legitimacy to enforce a total alcohol ban in the CBDs of any of the three towns. So that could easily mean no bars, no hotels, no beer or wine in supermarkets. And I, for one, do not support a return to prohibition. You should include, your third question was, do you think we should include alcohol ban in areas in the bylaw? Well, no, because you're removing Featherston's, and you've pointed out that Featherston hasn't got a problem anymore. So I'm wondering, if Featherston hasn't got a problem, then you're perceiving Martinborough, Greytown have. And I can't see the point in having a bylaw for just to pop one in when you feel like popping one in. And pretty much because you haven't included them, you're going to include them for parks and recreation reserves and beaches. And agreeing with Aidan and supporting him, because the main thing is we need to get the police to put a permanent officer in Martinborough or any of the towns in Greytown, etc., if we've got a problem with alcohol on the streets and people are causing. I think this thing came about because you're worried about people's disorderly behaviour. Well, that's not really always alcohol related. So, and it's not up to the wineries or anyone that sells liquor to determine what those individual actions are after they've bought the alcohol. So that's all my questions and my answers on the submission. And thank you for letting me speak to you.
Oh, you're welcome, Jenny. Thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us. Councillors, do you have any questions for Jenny?
Possibly the same one that I asked Aidan, if I may, Madam Chair. So, Jenny, what you're saying is that you would prefer that council had no say in the policing of alcohol within the territorial authority. Yeah, that you'd rather leave it to the police and as per the Summary Offences Act et al.
Well, as I understand it, because we used to have a winery, so when we're applying for your liquor licensing, you've got to go through the police checks anyway to have it.
Yeah.
So I think what you're trying to do is lovely in a holistic way, but in reality, why putting up a sign deters all the good people like us, do not drink alcohol in public areas, but the ones that are going to do it, they're going to flout the law anyway. So, and so, like you said, it's just adding another layer of signs that get written, broken, and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's just a cost. And it's for what benefit?
So you'd like us to remove ourselves from any alcohol control and leave it to the police would be the end result of that.
control as to who gets liquor licenses, or is alcohol control as to who's drinks in the streets? Or
being able to react to a problem, and we would rely on the police to do that, as opposed to have any powers within the territorial authority.
Yeah, the way I see it though, because I'm sort of debating, so if we do have a problem with alcohol in the street, is the council, like the dog control officer, is the council going to employ a alcohol control officer to issue fines or take them away, or will this bylaw have that ability to do that?
We'll move that on to discussion.
Okay.
Because
that's the thing about a bylaw. It's like the dog control bylaw means that the council comes along, the person comes along, picks up the dog and takes it away to the pound. Is it the same? Is it going to be able to, is your mechanism going to work the same way, that a person will come along, pick those people up and put them in not a pound, but like a holding facility until the police come, or whatever you're going to do with them afterwards?
I don't think any council officer has that power.
So it's a bylaw. It's the same. So if it's a parallel bylaw type thing, yeah, it's up to you to decide what you're going to do, how you're going to manage it.
Jenny, we can cover that question with detail when we get a report from our council officers, because I'm sure that your question is one that they will have a response to, and it would be good to hear their view. I guess my question's a little bit similar to Mayor Bairn's, and it's just in regard to do you not see that as a council that we have a role in alcohol regulation and actually looking at potential alcohol related harm?
Short answer, no.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That's your view. Thanks you for answering the question. Okay, Councillor Hay, you've got a question.
Hi Jenny, thanks for coming along. I was just wondering if you're aware that both the police and Toast Martinborough support these measures during Toast. Were you aware of that at all?
No, but that's their business, and so that's fine if they're happy with that. But I just feel as though it seems to be the fun police have come because everything now has to be done in prescriptive things. So the reason for Toast Martinborough's success, it's a nice fun day out, everyone enjoys themselves. So to me, they are probably just trying to tick every box going. I've got no concerns. If they're happy to support the council, that's fine. But a personal view, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay.
Thanks, Jenny. I don't have any other questions, but I do appreciate you taking the time to put in a written submission and coming to speak to us today. Thank you very much. And of course, you're welcome to stay and remain in this meeting if you want to. I'm just looking to see that it doesn't appear that we have got Shane or a representative from Poppies anywhere on the meeting. Has Suzanne, I'm not sure if you've heard any more from Poppies.
Not this morning, sorry.
Not this morning. Okay. I would have quite liked to have heard from them actually, given that they wanted to speak. I guess then the process is, do we want to just give them 5 minutes to join? Yeah, okay. Well, why don't we just take a 5-minute recess. Suzanne, I just wonder if we should just try and contact Poppies and see whether or not they're still planning on joining the meeting so that we can move on.
I can do that in the recess.
Thank you, that would be great. All right, we'll have a 5-minute break, team, and we'll come back. What is it? 9:53 a.m. I think we can all add 5 minutes onto that and work out where we land up. Cool. Feel free to leave your camera on if you want to, or turn it off.
put this.
Oh,
This is my son's new puppy dog,
very, very cute. What's the dog's name?
Gizmo. He came from Gisborne.
Oh, he's really cute. Love his wee coat.
I think that's a bit namby-pamby, but hey.
He's very cute. I'm trying to keep the cat off my desk because he has a habit whenever I'm in council meetings. Yeah, I know. Yeah, everyone in my work knows about the cat, but yeah. Gizmo's very cute. Look at him looking.
Gorgeous. I love his jacket. A name, Alex?
Gizmo. Gizmo from Gisborne.
What sort of a dog is he, Alex?
Jack Russell Foxy Cross.
All right. Yeah, he's sort of got that long nose, but you know.
Like a cat with personality.
Yeah.
Did a Jack Frost.
Yeah.
He's very, very cute. Yeah. Where would we be without our animals? I think they keep us sane. Suzanne, have we had the chance to hear back from Poppies?
He's not answering his phone. Sorry, I'd probably move on.
That's what I think.
We do have this submission on record, so
we do. So just going back to his submission or their submission, everyone will have read this. I think we can take that into account when we go through our deliberations. So what we'll do now is we will move into our deliberations. Our officers have prepared a report for us, and what we'll do is just go through their analysis, and then we'll have a discussion about the submissions that we've just heard. So do I have a mover to receive the proposed alcohol control bylaw? Councillor Hay, seconded by Councillor Colenso. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Cool, everyone is there. The motion is carried. Now, I see we've got Karen, you've just popped up. Ms. Yates, would you please provide an overview of the bylaw for the people in the meeting today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, certainly. The bylaw proposal is contained within the statement of proposal that everybody's had the opportunity to read and to provide some comments on. I won't go through that in detail because I think as we progress through the report, we will be touching on those various important parts there and considering what the submissions are. I think it's important to note that the LGA has quite strict requirements around bylaws, and that's the process that we followed. And that being that the special consultative procedure must be used because this is a regulatory tool, and therefore it has to undergo very close scrutiny, and that's picking up some of the concerns that the submitters have gone into there. And so there are quite strict criteria that we must comply with. The proposal requires us to set out what the nature of the problem is that we're trying to address, and we'll pick up on that in the next part. But the nature of the problem and the options that we can use to adopt that, and the proposed solution that we propose, and that's what we've contained within the statement of proposal. It's important to note that those the criteria that the LGA specifically in relation to alcohol bylaws, there were amendments to the legislation. The Law Commission had conducted a review of alcohol bans prior to the changes and felt that they were a little bit too widespread, and there wasn't necessarily evidence of a problem in the particular areas where the alcohol bylaws and bans were. And so they recommended that stricter criteria were adopted that then made sure that any bylaw that came through or any ban that came through was the minimum necessary restriction on people's rights and freedoms. And I think this is what submitters have also picked up on. We wouldn't want a bylaw that unnecessarily restricts people's ability to have a drink when they want. Most people drink socially and there's no problem at all. And, you know, we are talking about people's freedom to move and to do what they want. So we must be really careful about that, and that's the criteria that we have to meet, and that's what we've addressed in the statement of proposal. So for every part of the proposal and every part of the deliberations that we go through now, it's really important to remember, is this restriction the minimum necessary restriction on people's rights and freedoms, or is there a better way of doing it, or an alternative way of doing it? And I hope to express that in the report, but it's important that councillors have that in their mind. So that's all I really want to say at this point, and then we can address everything as we go through.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very, very helpful. Does anybody have any questions? I see me, Ben, you've got your hand up already. What would you like to ask?
Yes. Could you comment on what the LGA perceives as a minimum level of legislation? Like it was proposed that we have no involvement. Is that a possibility under the Act, or do we have a minimum responsibility in this area?
So there are provisions within the LGA around the areas that we are concerned with as a local authority, and health and safety are those areas. So the general provisions of Section 147 around enabling bylaws looks to those as one of the reasons that you can have a bylaw. And then specifically with the amendments in 147A is around you can have a bylaw, you may have a bylaw to control alcohol in public places. And so that's what this is designed to do. And then the criteria specifically says, but if you do have a bylaw, you must meet these minimum levels. And that's where we talk about that there must be evidence in most cases of a high level of crime or disorder that's either caused or made worse by drinking in or possessing alcohol in public places. So it provides that framework. You may do this, and then if you do, then this is the criteria. But by having the provisions within the bylaw, then it's certainly legitimate for council to have a bylaw if there is a problem.
So following on from that, if I may, Madam Chair, so in as much as we are replacing two current bylaws with one and removing one restriction of public rights, i.e. the Featherston liquor ban, we are moving towards minimising the necessary restrictions on rights, one could say, short of getting rid of our alcohol bylaws in totality.
So I think it's important to note, as we've said in the statement of proposal, the new requirements came in and basically set a higher bar for what bans should meet. Our previous bylaws, and they are previous bylaws, so this is, even though this is a bylaw that's replacing the same aspects, it is technically a new bylaw because the old bylaw provisions were overtaken, superseded by legislation, and so they fell away. So we need to have, if this decision is that we need a bylaw, or I think it's appropriate for a bylaw for various reasons, then we need to have a new bylaw. The provisions in the new bylaw take into account those different legislative provisions, and so yes, I would say that they are now, by not having, for example, not recommending a ban in CBD, that's taking into account those new provisions. So it is a lesser restriction on people's rights and freedoms. Yes.
Mayor Bain, you actually asked the very question that I was going to ask Ms. Yates. Look, I'm not sure if this is an appropriate time to just pick up on one of the questions from the submitters, but I can't see there's a better place necessarily to pick it up. It's just around what Jenny Boyne remarked, is would we be looking at having enforcement provisions in this bylaw? So would our bylaws inspectors be able to do anything if people were, I guess, acting outside of the bylaw, should we adopt it? What would their role be?
So the bylaw, so we would have, if we did have permanent areas, then we would have signage up, and it would be legitimate for our officers and for members of the public, for example, to say there's a sign there, we've got an alcohol ban, and that's part of the benefits of having a ban, is that it's very visible, that people can actually informally enforce. But the actual enforcement powers for related to alcohol are quite prescriptive within the legislation, and they are enforcement powers for the police. So just to respond, But no, we wouldn't, of course, be actually confining people. I think there would be some serious infringements of human rights if we even attempted to do that. But the police have those necessary powers of search and seizure, and they are pulled in within the bylaw.
That's right. Thank you for that. That's what my understanding was as well. So we're basically talking about signage and promotion and indicating that there is a ban in that particular space. Thank you. Councillor Eames, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just carrying on from your comment there, Madam Chair. The support for the bylaw by police and obviously Toast Martinborough. I'm just interested to know what the Toast Martinborough organisation, what their feeling was. Are they liable in some way for any indiscriminate activities in the square? I mean, are they actually got a vested interest in protecting and maintaining the square because they are liable as the organiser?
Well, I can start off with that, and then perhaps Rick or Hazel can jump in. The event organisers have been very supportive of the ban every year because it enables them to be able to promote a safe event. It contributes to public perception that any issues will be dealt with, and so they recognise also that large scale events, particularly alcohol related events, there's a high likelihood that there might be crime or disorder, and they don't want that to happen because that puts prejudice on their event, and they want that to continue. They work very closely, my understanding, every year that we've had the Toast, they work very closely with our alcohol bylaws people, and to make sure that whatever measures that they put in place are going to minimise those examples of crime and disorder. So Rick, Hazel, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so with all large events, especially with alcohol, it doesn't matter whether it's Super 14 games, whether it's a rave, whether it's a Toast Martinborough, they have to meet minimum requirements to get a special licence. And that has been handed down by the authority, so ALA, who is the overall authority within New Zealand's jurisdiction. And that case law has come down in terms of the restrictions that these event organisers need to ensure that their event meets. If they are willing or if they're able to have it. And those things are beyond its boundaries of just the event. So such things like how people exit to make sure that their event doesn't cause nuisance or damage to anybody else's property on the ending of their event. So we make sure from an alcohol inspector's point of view, police and medical officer health, is that all those criteria are put within the application, and that's security, that's the end of the event, that's how people are exiting. So specifically for Toast Martinborough, we ensure that they have buses that go out to the various townships, and that includes going over to Wellington as well. Intoxication and the sale of alcohol is not just limited to the boundary of your premises. It actually extends further, and this has been an extension that has been seen from about 2010 and has been brought about by Sir Geoffrey Palmer's commission report that highlighted that through the Wellington Courtney Place scenarios, in which Sir Geoffrey Palmer was out at 3 o'clock in the morning with local bobbies to understand what the nightlife was and recognise that people's behaviours outside of premises did have an adverse effect on communities. So that's something that Toast has recognised. And if you look over the history of the last 4 to 5 years, various events, whether you look at Addington, Auckland Racecourse, Trentham, Melbourne Cup, you would have seen the newspaper articles of individuals overindulging. And this has been through the Alcohol Inspectors Network, very prominent. And we've taken a lot of work to get these organisations, these events, to where people have fun. They add value to the community, but there's not the adverse damage or nuisance caused by it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't aware that it extended beyond the premises they were in. So thank you for that. I understand. I can understand where Toast is coming from.
Yeah, Toast, we have to say as an organisation have been very proactive in terms of talking to the agencies, and we have a briefing before the event, which includes the organisers, and it's with the vineyards that participate to understand how the event for that year is going. And also we have a debrief, and that's with all the agencies and operators, and then the operators themselves have a debrief between themselves how it went as well. So as an organisation, Toast Martinborough have very proactive in terms of ensuring the event is adding value to our region as opposed to having any negative effects.
So can I just say, in summary, that it's actually an advantage to Toast Martinborough if we have a facility for a liquor ban, because it actually strengthens their hand in running their event for that one day.
Exactly. Exactly that. You've summed it up perfectly. It adds value and strengthens their event to make sure that everybody goes home safely and has an enjoyable time without those negative behaviours.
Thank you. Great.
Councillor Hay.
Hi there, thank you. Hazel and Rick, just a question. Since we've had those bans in place, what sort of feedback, not just from Toast, but from within the community have you had? Has it generally been positive, or what's your feedback on that? Because it's been in place for how many years now for Toast? It's been in place for 4 years or longer?
Oh, I think it's longer than that, isn't it?
Longer than
that. So in my 9 years at the council, there's been a temporary alcohol ban for Toast Martinborough every year that I've been there. I believe it goes back to the 2011 or 2010 existing bylaw, and I haven't had any feedback about it, to be honest, which would tell me that it's working, because we haven't had anything to say that it's not.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Hazel. Mayor Baird?
Yeah, so the comment was made that we were signalling out Toast Martinborough with a permanent liquor ban, and how do we rescind that? But if I could just clarify a question from Aidan, if Toast Martinborough does not occur, there is no liquor ban just by default, because the event attached to the liquor ban it doesn't exist. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can respond to that. Yes, it just sits in place for when the event occurs. There's the extra provision within the bylaw, of course, that if the event does occur and you do want to engage the alcohol ban, effectively you have to give 14 days notice. And so obviously we wouldn't then engage it if the event wasn't going to go ahead.
Yeah. And also with regards to it being permanently enshrined in the legislation, this can be revoked at any council meeting by a resolution if we feel that it's unnecessary or restrictive. Is that correct?
We'd have to go through the proposals, and it depends on how the alcohol ban, if it is contained within the bylaw itself, and there need to be amendments or revocations, and we'd go through the proposed clause 6 for that, and that would be through the special consultative procedure. So it could be done through a resolution or an amendment to the bylaw, effectively which is the same sort of procedure. It's just dealt with in a slightly different way.
Because, I mean, I think we do need to. I mean, I think we will regularly review this if Toast Martinborough changes in size, or the location for the congregation point moves out of the square, then potentially this bylaw may end up being redundant. But we can react to that, is the main point.
Yes, and it wouldn't be the bylaw itself, it would be the ban for the accompanied Toast Martinborough that would be effectively redundant, but we would obviously need to amend that beforehand. But it's also important to remember that the bylaw needs to be reviewed after 5 years anyway, so that's what we're referring to as the lifetime of this bylaw.
And that's, of course, what's been noted in the bylaw as well. So, yeah, excellent. I guess it's really important to note that we need to have a mechanism to manage the event as well as future events as well, and this provides a potential opportunity to do that if the subcommittee wants to. Councillor Hems, your hand's up again.
I'm sorry. I'm just we're looking at a negative side here, which is the ban in Martinborough. I'd like to look at the positive side, which is the lifting of the ban in Featherston. And through the officers, has there been any feedback from that or comment? It seems to me that there's actually quite a positive response to the lifting of that ban. And we're only talking about in the Martinborough situation where it's actually supported, and it seems to me is to the benefit of the event organizer. So the Featherston one is a plus, is that correct?
Yes, so through our pre-consultation engagement, that was very much the feedback that we had from stakeholders, that there wasn't an issue. So remember, we have to determine whether there's an issue in the first place for there to be an alcohol ban, and it was certainly felt through all of the stakeholders that we spoke to, the police included, that there wasn't sufficient evidence. Now, we will go into that in a little bit more detail when we come through to it into the report, but I also understand that there was some support. So Rick's just turned his video off, and I was just about to go to Rick just to bring Rick on. So there was some desire amongst licensed premises to be able to actually have alcohol outside. Is that right, Rick?
Yeah. So through the application, we have in all townships we have various premises that are like outdoor dining, and Featherston's one of those. And with the current ban in place, they weren't able to use that opportunity for their customers and to promote the main street of where they are. So we had very strong feedback from some of those owners to say, could we have the opportunity that's available to every Martinborough and Greytown as well? And so it was quite a timely thing, and they were very wanting, for a better word, the opportunity to have that outside dining. And that's where the discussion is, as Karen's pointed out, was the current alcohol ban still fit for purpose? And was it based on anything that we had currently before us? And that's where this discussion has been, I think, quite positive for the likes of Featherston.
I agree with that. Councillor Colenso, I think you had your hand up before.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge some points within the submissions we got. And Karen, that was relating to the time frame for the review of the alcohol bylaw. Is there a mechanism that we could reduce that time frame from 5 years to, say, 3 years to review that, and just make sure that that's still fit for purpose within that time, and then go to the statutory requirements after that?
We can certainly do that, as we could recommend to council that there is an earlier review period. Those are you must review it, a new bylaw, after 5 years, and then every 10 years thereafter. And I guess the consideration would be the officer time that would be taken to do that. I do propose, and that's been part of the proposals in the earlier reports through to the committee and to council, is that actually we're monitoring it all the time, and that we need to be engaging with our community and our stakeholders and our community board on an ongoing basis as to whether there is a need for any alcohol ban throughout the district. But we can certainly recommend a provision for an earlier review.
Thank you.
Okay, some good questions there, Bayan.
It's a question for Karen, and I'm not sure whether you can answer it, but I've scanned a number of council bylaws. Are you aware of any council in the country that does not have the ability to, or it does not have a alcohol bylaw part to their bylaws?
I'm not, but I haven't surveyed all of the however many territorial authorities we have. But the provision from, and as I said, the review of the LGA was that alcohol bans were very, very extensively used before. So I would be very surprised if there was any territorial authority that didn't have a bylaw that had a mechanism. But as we are very fortunate to be in the position that there may not necessarily be alcohol bans associated with that.
Thank you.
Councillor Colenso.
Sorry, just before we go on to discuss the actual bylaw, under just a minor alteration to it, under 3, which is the interpretation, in the explanatory notes that are there, we've got, it says on the last line that a case assessment will be made, and I think that's meant to say a case by case assessment will be made. So just that small typo just before we get going and I forget. Thank you.
Thank
Where
you.
would we be without you, Pam?
Yeah. Good call, Pam. Thank you for that. Okay.
So through you, Chair, I've got a Karen / Rick question. So under this proposed bylaw, should an event occur involving alcohol in Greytown, for example, can this bylaw be used in the same way as we do with Toast? And I'm not proposing that there is going to be a large-scale event, but should that occur, could the same bylaw be used in that event?
Yes, so part of the proposal is to have a mechanism that you can have temporary bans for events, because they're usually the ones that crop up, as we know, throughout the length of a bylaw. You know, I guess Toast is different because we have it every year, and we know that we have it every year, and it's been well established. But usually there'll be an event that crops up during the year, and so we could use that mechanism to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
But we would need the mechanism in the first place within the bylaw.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good response. Thank you. Right, I think we've probably come to a point where it's about time we consider, and some of us we've actually touched on, we've been looking at some of the submissions, and we've had some dialogue around that right now, but we've got 23 submissions, which you'll have all had a look at. We had 3 people today that were going to submit, and unfortunately we've missed Poppy's. We've only had Aidan and Jenny able to meet with us today. So our officers have summarised the submissions and they've provided us some advice, and what I think we need to do is just start to move through the rest of the meeting and deal with some of those points. So could I please have a mover now that we consider all of the submissions on the statement of proposal for the bylaw, proposed bylaw? Councillor Hay, and seconded by Councillor Eames. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Everyone's good there, that's great. Right, what we're going to do is look at recommendations 3 and 4 of the report together, but we're going to discuss them separately. So officers are asking us to adopt the proposed bylaw subject to any amendments or recommendations. We're not necessarily going to know what those recommendations or amendments are until we've worked through the report in its entirety, and we can come back to that when we've done it and finished our submission. So the question right now is whether we adopt the proposed bylaw, is whether we agree that with the problem definition as stated in the statement of proposal. So we need to discuss that, and that we need to then look at whether the bylaw is an appropriate way to address the problem, taking into account the analysis of the proposal. Right, so the question that we were asked to consider as were members of the public was, is crime or disorder caused or made worse by the consumption of alcohol in public places? And you've looked at the submissions of the analysis for that. We had 27% that agreed that there was a problem, and there were 73% that said they didn't think is a problem. So we probably need to have a bit of a discussion about that. And just before we do, I'll just see briefly whether Ms. Yates, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think just to focus our minds around the problem definition, so what submitters are agreeing or disagreeing with. And this is what we talked about previously, we've touched on, that the LGA requires you to set out what the policy problem is that you're trying to address through a bylaw. And the policy problem is that crime or disorder. So it's a very broad issue that we're trying to address through the bylaw itself. And the bylaw effectively provides you with different mechanisms, so alcohol bans, permanent alcohol bans, temporary alcohol bans, mechanisms to enable future bans, to address that policy problem. And I think my commentary around, and I think councillors will need to have a discussion of the submissions, but my commentary around some of the disagreement around they didn't necessarily agree with the bylaw is that people felt that they didn't see that there was a problem of crime or disorder. And that very much is what officers have noted in the statement of proposal, that in particular areas we don't necessarily see a problem. We're very in a great position to be able to say in our district we don't necessarily have those problem areas that other territorial authorities may have in particular places, and we recognise that Featherston doesn't have that problem anymore. But without a bylaw, without a mechanism to deal with future problems, we wouldn't be able to address those future problems. So the question is, do we want to have a mechanism? And so that problem definition was really, this is the larger problem we're trying to solve, and there's problems within there, and there's different solutions for dealing with those different solutions. So it's much more of a broader inquiry.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. That certainly does. Team, do you have any questions that you want to raise around that, or any points of clarification? Nothing? No? Great. Well, I think that's pretty clear then. I think that probably then takes us to being able to recommend then, and I'll be needing a seconder and a mover for this, that we recommend to council that the proposed alcohol bylaw be adopted subject to any amendments recommended by the committee. So can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Eames, and seconded by Mayor Bain. Anybody against? No. Great. All right. Well, the motion will be carried then. Thank you. All right. Now, if I can ask you to please move to recommendation 4 of the report. Recommendation 4 of the report is that we agree that the purpose of the proposed bylaw be amended. Sorry, I think I've jumped ahead, haven't I? Sorry. Actually, I think we've commented about, we've just probably had a good discussion about the proposal. I don't know if we need to move further with that, do we? Is Suzanne or Karen? I'm happy with the commentary that we've just had to move to actually recommendation 4. Ms. Yates?
I just wondered, I'm perfectly happy to answer any of the questions around the officer's advice and response to the submissions, if there's anything in particular. I mean, we have had, as you say, a very good discussion around a number of those points, but whether there are any points within those submissions that councillors wanted to address. We have spoken around the nature of the problem being a little bit more extensive than actual, particular areas, and we've had a good discussion, I think, around, unless people want to actually talk more about the police powers, because that is, a legitimate point that the police do have powers. Did you want to, Madam Chair, did you want to have a little bit more of a discussion around those points?
Look, I think we have had a conversation, but I'll open it up to the floor if anybody wants to pick up on further questions, just thinking about what Ms. Yates has just raised. Councillor Hay, you've got a question.
So this is a question for Rick. If you look at the previous toast, say over the last 5 years, how many arrests, are you aware of how many arrests have been made by the police? Or warnings rather than arrests?
Yeah, so I know the last 2 that I've been involved in, the suggestion from the police were with the gatherings at the end at the square, and that's where most of the trouble occurred and resulted in, I think, and I don't really want to be quoted because it is a police matter, but it was around about 5 incidences that did occur, and one was a bit of a large dispute between individuals. So they do it in terms of they don't arrest, so they sort of use the graduated response model, and they're very keen for people to enjoy the day and recognise that the event adds value to the region, and therefore have been quite considerate in terms of their responses. So in terms of arrests, I don't believe in the last couple of years, but they have definitely in the debriefing raised concerns as to the gathering point at the end of the event at the square, and want to just make sure that there wasn't a continuation of not only the revellers from Toast Marlborough, but those that are coming from outside of the Toast event into the square, because that's the gathering point. So it could be exiting from a local establishment, or they may have had a bit of a party at their own premises, and because they see 3,000 or 4,000 people congregating there with bands and that, they're sort of adding to that. So there's been incidences. They've been of the minor, if I'm allowed to use that, occurrence, and they've handled it in a discretionary point of view, and it's something they don't want to see elevated, and therefore discussions have been, we want to sort of rather than bring on ACDC or anyone, maybe Kenny Rogers or I don't know, Midge Marsden or something, to mellow down that sort of wind down period, because that's what a lot of the vineyards do at their individual sites, is when it's near the end, they're very conscious of that, want people to move on in a nice orderly manner, and they're winding them down, get to the square, and if it's a big hyped event again, sort of just adds to it, rather than the nice dissipation of individuals going home after enjoying their time in the Martinborough vineyards.
That's right.
Great. Thank you very much, Rick. That was a very good, useful reply. Well, so I've got one quick other question. I'm assuming that there are police allocated to the event on the day anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're very lucky here in that because of the establishment and the rapport that alcohol inspectors have built over the years, the police are a very good agency for us, and they do allocate a good size of their resources to our events, such as Toast Marlborough, to the rave. They really took a keen interest. And they're very good at talking to us in regards to what is it that our expectation is of officers and agencies with the events. And we're very much, Hazel's very collaborative in terms of the operators and the vineyards and Toast Marlborough itself, and have come to an agreement of what they want. But yes, police do allocate a fair chunk of their resources to our events over here.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick.
Hazel, if I can just jump in here, have you got any comments that you want to make around that?
No, I think Rick summed it up pretty well there.
Cool, thank you. Ms. Yates.
Just picking up on those discussions and on some comments that Aidan made around the police powers. Our understanding when we were having our pre-consultation engagement with the police is that the police are supportive of alcohol bans because they are complementary measures to the powers that they currently have. Bans are preventative. They give signals through signage and through notification ahead of there being any problems. Police powers are generally limited to where their problems are starting to become apparent, and of course they want to take a preventative first approach and actually get on top of that, and so that's to me my understanding of why the police are supportive of that, and why relying on police powers may not then plug all of those gaps and serve that purpose of having a preventative measures.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely, that's been my observations, having been involved in the event in the past. And yeah, it's certainly a lot of de-escalation techniques used, but also some really good practices used within the vineyards to support safe drinking and you know, manage that potential alcohol related harm. So it's good. Anybody got any other questions that they'd like to raise, just relating to that recommendation 4 that we're discussing? Okay, all right, now I'll move on to this. Do I have a mover, please, to agree that the purpose of the proposed bylaw be amended as stated in paragraph 3.1 of the proposed alcohol control bylaw report? Mayor Bayan, thank you. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Colenso. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Great, motion is carried. Okay, now we're going to move on to the proposed bylaw controls. So they're covered in section 3.3 of the report. Just wonder, so that section 3.3 of the report is going to cover off sections 5 to 9 recommendations. Sorry, 5 to 9. Karen, you've got your hand up.
I'm very sorry, Madam Chair. I've just noticed reference into the report itself that actually the report is paragraph 3.2 that talks about the specific change to the purpose of the bylaw. Suzanne, can you confirm that? I think we just had a rogue finger typo.
Yes, it is actually. Yeah. Yes, it is. So it's covered in section, you're right, 3.2.
Yeah, 3.2.1 specifically amending the purpose just to make it more clear and expanding around that area.
Yeah, so that's page 4 of your report, everybody. I didn't pick that up myself, actually. So thank you for pointing that out just now. I think I was clear on what it was that we were doing, but not necessarily the numbers that linked. Is everybody clear, though, that that's what we're doing? We're looking at the proposed bylaw control. Great. Okay, cool. So let's look at recommendations 5 and 6 first. Specifically, they deal with Toast Martinborough. So the proposed bylaw looks to include an alcohol ban accompanying the Toast event. And of course, the ban is within the bylaw itself. But previously, a ban had to be sought for each event. So, of course, what this bylaw is doing is putting a ban in place for 5 years if the bylaw is adopted. The question asked of submitters was around whether they agreed with the proposed control. Now, officers have provided us with a summary and some analysis around that, and there are 7 points in the summary for us to consider. So I just wonder, Ms. Yates, do you have any comments that you want to make just around that analysis right now? And then we can have a conversation amongst us around what that looks like.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I think looking at the sort of broad categories there of the responses that have come back, I think it was felt that picking up on the problem definition, some of the submitters didn't feel that there was a need for the ban for Toast because there wasn't necessarily a problem of alcohol related crime. And we've had some discussion around that, but maybe we had quite a lot of discussion around the preventative measures of Toast there. And then I think there was also perhaps a lack of clarity around the current ban that's in place, which means that the current ban is working very well if nobody actually realises that there is a ban in place and that we are actually achieving our aim and everybody's still having a really good time. And then there were some other considerations in there that I'm happy to take questions on, but I have provided a response back.
Yeah, you have. I've actually just got a question there, and it was sort of touched on by Councillor Hay before, just around, you know, if, for example, Toast was to change its name or the event was, you know, to look slightly different in the future, we can review that. But, you know, whether we substantially need to review that or not, we've got a process for doing that. And I think you've touched on that, haven't you?
Yes, I have. And I think that so the two options that have been provided are really does it stay within the bylaw? There are mechanisms for changing that if it does stay within the bylaw, or does it sit outside the bylaw? So we need to make a resolution every year, and that's the decision that the committee should make.
Yeah. Right. So what we're really talking about, team, is whether or not we think that there's actually a need for a ban. So anybody got anything that they'd like to raise around that specifically? Mayor Bain?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been to 24 Toast Martinboroughs. I've worked at 10 of them. And I remember when the issue came up regarding public disorder, and this was the response to it. I am mindful of comments from the submitters. However, I do see that the police are very much, and I've raised this actually at the bylaws a number of times, are very much in support of this iconic event occurring because, in part, that there is this bylaw, and also the event organisers wish it to occur. Additionally, the fact that we are allowing it to, I have no problem with it going for 5 years, in as much as the event's been going for 27 under a very similar format, but it can be reviewed very easily if the format changes. So I think it just makes life easier for everyone, and also gives the police the ability to have a better overview of an alcohol-dependent event within an urban area.
I think it gives them certainty, doesn't it? Yeah, good call. Councillor Hay?
A few of the submitters, this is a Karen question, a few of the submitters have suggested that the event might change substantially, or it may even come under a new name, for example. So just from a legal perspective, if it was a new name, if it was changed from Toast Martinborough to something else, so again, the same mechanisms to change that within the bylaw would be quite straightforward. Is that correct?
I wouldn't necessarily say quite straightforward. There are mechanisms there, and it really does depend on the extent of the change, and whether how significant and how substantive it is, as to what procedure we would need to go through. If it was a minor change, then it could be just a consideration of does it actually have an effect. So if it was a name change, and I think people understand what the event is, I be very surprised if there was any changes to the name, given that
I'm just trying to preempt some of the complication.
Yeah, I think if we were looking at some minor changes to the time, for example, we'd have to consider how substantive that was. If it was extended an hour, and the consultation that would be needed for that. Whether it's just a notification, or if it was substantive, and we were looking, for example, to encompass twice the area of the street surrounding there, then that's potentially a quite a significant change and impact on people's rights and freedoms, as we keep coming back to that fundamental question. But I think even the most extensive change, we would go through the special consultative procedure, the procedure that we're going through now. We'd put out a proposal. It would just take a number of months to be able to do that, but the mechanism would be there regardless of how extensive the change would be.
Great, thank you very much, Karen.
Thanks, Karen. Councillor Colenso.
Madam Chair, could I ask Karen if she could expand on, we're looking at an option as to put the ban in place as a permanent part of the bylaw, or to remain as a temporary ban, which is what Toast Martinborough apply for at the moment. What are the benefits or the disadvantages to Toast Martinborough of having a ban in place rather than having to apply for a temporary? What differences will be in that change of application for them to hold the event?
So just to be clear, there's not really an application. It's our ban that we decide to put in place as a territorial authority and as in response to the community. But of course, we work very closely with Toast. So really, the change would be that we would not need to be able to every year to sit down and have that conversation around putting the ban in place. Because there's a difference of legislative requirements, we would need, if it wasn't sitting within the bylaw, we would need to then be able to go and demonstrate that there was sufficient evidence or sufficient likelihood that if there wasn't a ban in place, that there would be a risk of alcohol-related crime or disorder, and be able to demonstrate that within the application for to the committee to put in place an alcohol ban. And sometimes that gets, when you've had a ban in place for however many years, and it's working really well, then it's actually just a presumption that without the ban in place you would have that problem, but it is effectively coming to be a presumption. You wouldn't be able to get, evidence and quantitative evidence to do that, but it provides for me the certainty of including it within there, as Madam Chair quite rightly pointed out, that it is the certainty of it being there until and if it was substantially changed, and that gives people the opportunity to plan ahead, and it means also that it's actually more efficient to do it just the once rather than coming back every year. And we know that we've got tight timeframes and we've got other priorities, and it's just making sure that it's always top of mind and that we've got it done in time effectively. And if we have to consult, then we'd have to build in that extra time frame as well for consulting. So it comes down to practicality, it comes down to efficiency.
Okay, so would Toastmasters still need to put in an application to actually hold the event, or does that take that requirement away as well?
Perhaps Rick could jump in here. What happens every year, Rick, when you start to have your discussions?
Okay, so Toastmasters, if they're selling alcohol, need to apply for a special license to hold the event. That's applies to everyone. In terms of the traffic management plan, they'd have to still put in that. But with them applying for the specific ban around the square, it means that for them, they also have a heightened ability to ensure that there's not infiltration of other individuals coming into the event with alcohol. So one of the big things with large events is what they call preloading, i.e. you're having your booze at home and then you're going to the event, and there's no level of control as to the level of intoxication. And then there's the side loading, which is where they might stash it in a bush just outside of the band area, go down there, have a few cans and then come back in. So it sort of helps the organisers in terms of ensuring that they can monitor their patrons for their event. Is that answered sort of your question?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I think that I'm probably muddling two things up. One, the application to hold the event, and one, the actual bylaw and the alcohol part of that application. And so, to hold the event, they still need to make an application for a special license. But what this putting it into the schedule means, it provides both the organisers and council officers surety that we're not going to miss deadlines, because we have to advertise this a month before the event, and therefore if we were running behind schedule, we could actually jeopardise the event. So Ms. Yates and I have discussed this, and we found that it's for an efficiency point of view for the organisation as well as ourselves, to create that certainty for that event, which we believe is an ongoing event and has proven that, as the Mayor has illustrated. Okay, thanks, Rick. Thanks both of you to clarify that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I agree with that too. That's quite clear. Quite clear what needs to still take place for the event to run, regardless. Now, Karen, you had your hand up. You want to say something? Add something? No? Okay, cool. All right, does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask? I think we've had a good debate around that. All right, well, we're going to move to recommendation 5 then. And recommendation 5 is that we agree that the proposed bylaw make provision for an alcohol ban to accompany the Toast Martinborough event. Do I have a mover for that? Mayor Bain, seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Eames. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Great. Motion is carried. Now, I think we've had quite a good conversation around whether or not we need a ban. We've got two options that we've been asked to consider, whether we look at a temporary ban or whether we look at providing a ban, which is in the bylaw. So I think that can we just have a conversation around whether there is a commitment and a clear thinking that actually that we retain an alcohol ban to accompany Toast Martin Borough within Schedule 1 of the proposed bylaw. I think that's pretty much where we've been, our conversation's been heading to. So would I be correct in saying that? All good? Yeah, that's where I thought the conversation was heading. Okay, so then if I can have a mover, please, that we retain the alcohol ban to accompany Toast Martin Borough within Schedule 1 of the proposed bylaw. Councillor Hay, seconded by Mayor Bayan. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. The motion's carried. Okay, so that's great. So now we've landed on that we will be retaining a ban within the bylaw. Okay. Now we're going to look at recommendation 7. So recommendation 7 is that we agree that there is no permanent alcohol ban for specific areas and facilities to be included in the bylaw. Now let's have a bit of a discussion around that. Karen, I'm not sure if you've got anything that you want to add into that. Again, we've had quite a good discussion around the fact that we think that there's been good community feedback. There is support around removing that ban in Featherston. Is there anything that anybody else would like to add to that? Councillor Hay, you're on mute.
I just go back to the workshop that Karen ran several months ago, and the bar for having bans is actually set very high, if I recall correctly, Karen. And so to me, that bar is not being met when we look at areas like the previous Featherston ban, for example. So I'm very comfortable with where we've landed here myself. So, Karen.
Yeah.
I said I didn't want to say anything, but I just want to draw your attention to, and just picking up on Councillor Hay's point there, that in the previous discussions we had, Councillor Hay, we looked at, this is a new bylaw effectively because the old bylaw has fallen away. And so the assessment there is whether there is evidence of a high level of crime or disorder. A case could be made, and this is what I discuss in the report, that because the Featherston CBD ban was in place, we should be using an assessment that we need to look at whether there was a likelihood of crime and disorder eventuating had there not been a ban. So it's a different assessment, but I think the discussions that we've had across the board have been on either assessment. There's no evidence of crime or disorder at all, and so there's and it was a historical issue, and it's unlikely that that historical issue is still prevalent, so that it would raise its head again if the ban was not replaced. And so I just wanted to point out, it's a bit of a legal assessment there, but it's two different assessments. But my recommendation is that regardless of what assessment, we don't have that evidence or a risk of that returning.
And if I can just say something as well, Karen, if it did appear that there was a problem in Featherston, we do, of course, have a mechanism to deal with that as well.
That's right.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Clenzo, you had your hand up, and then Mayor Bayan.
Yes, in the submitters that we have, a number of people have mentioned putting bans in playgrounds, and so that we have an alcohol ban in playgrounds. And I know that came up in some of the workshops that were held, and I just still like your thoughts around why we wouldn't do that. I think it's important to reiterate that as to why we're not considering those in the ban.
I think that's something for you to answer, Karen. Yeah.
Yes, we don't meet the criteria. We don't have any evidence in those areas of a high level of crime or any level of crime or disorder. And in some parks, so for example, in the Marlborough Square in the park, it would be a significant restriction on people's rights and freedoms if we just said, no, we're not going to have an alcohol ban. We are going to have an alcohol ban in this area without that evidence of crime. I think what we're trying to address, what people are concerned about there, is actually disassociating the consumption of alcohol around young children, and so removing that normalising factor, which is a social issue, and unfortunately it's outside of the parameters of the criteria. And so whilst that's something we might not want to encourage, a bylaw isn't able to actually do that. But there are other ways that we can do that, and that'll be around things like our terms and conditions of licenses and leases and events, and working. I know that Rick has done some work with our sports clubs around disassociating drinking and associated with sports, so drinking on sidelines. And so there are other measures that we can take to try and address that, but they're outside the alcohol ban.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Good answer. Me, Bayan.
Yeah, thanks. I'm jumping ahead of Garrick. I think he just had his hand up, but then he got distracted. I would agree with you, Karen. We did raise the issue of a problem during the last school holidays around a Martinborough playground, but we must have a very high bar. We must have evidence of an ongoing problem to have a drastic step of an alcohol ban, and even then, that alcohol ban can only retain while there's evidence that it still exists. So, not that I'm a libertarian, but certainly we do need to follow that the rights of the population when looking at these sort of things.
Yep. Councillor Eames.
Yes, I'll just to clarify my position on my question really was, I'm assuming that South Wairarapa was in concert with our colleagues further up the valley, so Marston and Carterton. Do they have any examples we can look at where they have in fact imposed other bans? I mean, are we all at the same level of requirement to actually put a ban in, or are we standing out on a limb?
Well, we're all subject to the same legislation. Masterton do have a CBD ban, and they also have the temporary bans that come into place on Riversdale and Castle Point, I think, at Christmas time, because I think that they have established that there are problems there, or there have traditionally been problems there. I understand that Carterton do have bans around particular areas of parks, and I'm assuming there is because there was a high level previously of people congregating perhaps in consumption. So like I say, we are subject to the same legislation, so we would need to make the same bar.
That's right. Just as long as we're at the same, we're all competing for the same level. Great. Thank you.
Good question. I guess the other part to that is that different districts will have different needs as well. And even though we're working under the same legislation, the needs of one community or the requirements to manage might be a little bit different, but still really, really valid question. Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could suggest that we've really discussed 7 and 8, whether they might be put forward together.
Thank you for that, Mia. I think that's actually a really good suggestion, and I think we can probably do that. So what I'm going to do then is bring those 2 recommendations together. And the first recommendation is that it's number 7, that we agree that no permanent alcohol bans for specific areas and facilities be included in the bylaw as proposed. And recommendation 8 is this, that we agree that proposed mechanisms be included in the bylaw to enable council to make alcohol bans by resolution where criteria is met, including temporary bans associated with events or permanent bans associated with specific areas or facilities. A mover for that, please. We're in agreement for those 2. Thank you, Mayor Bayan. And
could I make a comment before we vote on that, please?
Yes, of course.
I think there needs to be some clarification around the fact that it is a full council that will make the decision or the resolution to for the criteria, because I think a number of submitters thought that it was council officers that were going to do that in-house, and my understanding is that it's not, that this would come, the officers would report and put that to a full council meeting for the decision to be made. And can we just have clarification around that before we vote, please?
You are right with that, Councillor Colenso. We're making a recommendation to council. Karen, do you have anything to add to that? We're not making the formal decision right now. It's a recommendation too.
This is a recommendation, but I think what the councillor's point is that those concerns be made that officers, of course, officers can't make resolutions. Only committees of council and council can make resolutions. Now, currently, the Planning and Regulatory Committee doesn't have delegation to make those resolutions because they are only recommendatory powers that the committee could have. But it could be that in the future that the council decide to delegate authority to the committee to make those resolutions, as long as they were not amending the bylaw, because only council can amend the bylaw. So it's a little bit of a, is it amendment? Is it, is it just an adjustment? But currently, as we stand, the Planning and Regulatory Committee can only make recommendations, so it would need to go to full council to make the resolution.
Thank you.
So I think, Pam, that clarifying that is that within number recommendation 8, when it says enable council, it means the elected officials as opposed to the South Wairarapa District Council.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because it had been brought up in the submission.
It's a perfectly good question. It's interesting how people read things differently, isn't it? Because from my perspective, when I read that, I saw that as being council, but I think it's always good to raise those things and make sure that we're all on the same page. So thank you for raising that. Okay, well, should we try that again then? I'll read those again. If we couple, that's all right, couple recommendations 7 and 8 together. So recommendation 7, agree that no permanent alcohol ban for specific areas and facilities be included in the bylaw as proposed. And recommendation 8 is agree that the proposed mechanisms be included in the bylaw to enable council to make alcohol bans by resolution where criteria is met, including temporary bans associated with events or permanent bans associated with specific areas or facilities. We okay with the wording there? All good. Okay. Moved and seconded by Mayor Bain and Councillor Colenso. Great. Okay, now moving on to recommendation 9.
We voted on that one, Rebecca?
We did. Sorry, thank you. We've forgotten. Is everyone in favour? I forgot. Everyone in favour. Thank you. Great. Motion is carried. My apologies. It is my first meeting.
I do that all the time, Rebecca.
I was hoping that I didn't. Okay. All right, we're going to move to recommendation number 9 now, team. So recommendation number 9 is that we agree that the consultation requirements for making alcohol bans under clause 5 and clause 6 of the bylaw be adopted. I have a mover for that. Councillor M, seconded by Councillor Hay. Thank you. Welcome, GP.
Hiya.
Okay, the motion is carried. Now, just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So our final recommendation that we're going to look at is, no, it's not the final actually, it's the second to last one, is recommendation 10, and it's dealing with tourism. So if we can, Ms. Yates.
Me again. I'm sorry. I just wanted to draw everybody's attention to that discussion around the consultation requirements. We have had quite a lot of discussion around that we would need to go to consultation, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was fully across the differences between the clause 5 requirements and clause 6 requirements, different levels of consultation for making temporary bans, different levels of consultation for making new bans or amending bans, because they are amending the bylaw, and that there was comfort around that those levels of consultation gave sufficient scrutiny to the making of bans, and it wouldn't necessarily just be officers making bans without that level of scrutiny, because it was in response to specific submitters' concerns. So I just wanted to make sure and draw everybody's attention to that before we move on.
And that's good. And I was about to ask for your comments on that. So thank you for jumping in there. I think it's really important that we do actually note that there have been some views established in that space and raised with us. So does anybody want to raise any questions in that space or further questions? No. Cool. Okay. Right. Well, then, I mean, I'm really encouraged by the level of community engagement that we've had, and I'm really encouraged by the suggestions that have been put forward for council in order to consider and to deal with this bylaw, particularly in regard to alcohol-related harm, both through advocacy and as well as through the use of appropriate regulation. So I'm quite heartened by that. I just want to record that. So what I'd like to do then is look to move recommendation 10 then. Oh, Councillor Clenzo, you've got your hand up.
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair. I'm not sure whether where I should put in this, but I would like to move that the bylaw is reviewed in 3 years, not in 5 in the initial stage, just to have an overview that it is working well, that nothing has changed that we need to look at again, and just do an overall review of it in 3 years rather than wait for the 5 years. A number of submitters suggested that, and I think that's probably quite a good idea, since this is basically a new bylaw.
Karen, I mean, I think that's probably a valid question, and submitters have raised it. Generally speaking, when a new bylaw is brought in, do we work on a 3-yearly or 5-yearly review? In my experience, it does depend on the bylaw, but what are your views in that space? I mean, we can
well, as we've noticed, that the legislation is 5 years, and that's just to force everybody into actually having a review, of new legislation. If council felt that we needed to have a 3-yearly review, and we have done that in previously with regulatory policies and plans, we've had an earlier review period than legislation requires. We just have to make sure that we understand the difference, that if we decided after 3 years that we didn't necessarily feel that we've had enough time to review and that we might not necessarily go through a full review, then that would be for council to make that decision and make another resolution. So it's not totally binding a new council to do that. It's basically saying, let's have a look in 3 years whether this is up for, whether we need to go through a full review process or not. So I think it's worthwhile to add in, and we can pop that recommendation at the end of all of the recommendations. Would be my view, if that's what the other councillors supported.
Thank you.
Okay. Just have a quick discussion around the table. Are people in favour of that generally? I personally don't see an issue with including an earlier review period. We can plan for that. It is a new bylaw. I don't see any major issues, but if it's providing confidence and allowing the opportunity for people to engage and make sure it's correct, I think it's a good thing to do. So just people want to have a discussion, or should we move with it? Mayor Bain.
Yeah, I mean, we have got an earlier timeframe being a new bylaw of 5 years. If there's any problems with it, like, we're going to be alerted to them pretty quickly, and we can review at any stage or resolve to that. If we have no issues in the first 5 years raised by either the public or by council officers, then obviously it's working fine. So I'm more than happy with retaining it at the 5 years, but to review it on need, which is inherent in the act.
Which is in here. Yeah. Anybody else got anything that they'd like to raise? No, I guess not. Look, I would have to say I'm reasonably relaxed about it. I understand the provision is for review. Pam, you're obviously looking at meeting a community need, but I'm actually going to pick up on what Mayor Bain has said, that there is a provision for an earlier review if we need to. And I'm conscious of the fact that a bylaw review actually does come with work, even though we can plan for it and schedule it. And I would be quite comfortable in actually staying with what the current recommendation is right now. So you would be too, would you, Councillor Hay? Okay, cool. All right then.
Okay, I'll go with the majority.
That's okay. We can record what you've noted anyway, so that's fine. Now, I've just had a message from someone that they might need to take a short break. We're actually nearly finished, but would people like to have just a quick 5-minute break, and then we can come back and just do the last section of the meeting? All right. So let's just meet back here in 5 minutes then. Okay. All right. See you soon, everybody. Nearly there, team.
Thank you for that break, Rebecca.
It's important that people are hydrated. All right. I think we're kind of at our 5 minutes, aren't we?
Rebecca, the that last one, number 11, that says it's the officers thing is in 3.5 of the report. It's under 3.7.
Okay.
I think
3.7. Let's just have a quick check. Yes, it is. You're exactly right. It is under 3.7, so we'll need to amend that. Okay. All right. We can make a note of that and do that when we get to it. Everyone's back on board. Welcome back. Pam, I just need to reflect back before when we were having a conversation about whether we were looking at a 3-yearly or a 5-yearly review of the bylaw. Were you passing a motion in that regard?
I was going to, but I think the feeling of the committee was that it should stay at 5 years. So I'm happy if that is the majority of everyone feels that, then I'm happy to just leave it at the 5 years.
Okay. So can I mean, I'm not asking for a formal vote on this. If you didn't pass a motion, it was a conversation. I don't know that we need to change anything in particular, but if you were passing a motion, then we would need to formally accept that and then second it and then determine whether you wanted to go forward. But if you're not, I think we're probably okay just to take it as a conversation and move forward with the 5-yearly review.
Yeah, I just
okay. That's
I just
what we'll
wanted
do.
to make sure that if people were unhappy with some parts of the bylaw, that there is the mechanism to review that earlier if necessary.
Yeah, Pat, that was only a comment from me. I don't think it was a comment from anyone else. I'm more than happy to listen to whether the other councillors wish to have a 3-year review embedded into the recommendations.
Councillor Hay, have you got something that you want to add to that?
I just think that there's sufficient mechanisms in the bylaw to allow us to review it if it's not working successfully. So I feel comfortable with the 5-year period.
Okay. Councillor Eames, your thoughts?
No, I can live with the 5 years, as long as there's access to review when we need it.
Okay, I think that's pretty clear then. I think the review was described that we can bring it forward if there's an issue, and I think we need to use the instruments that are available to us if that's the case. So you've got your hand up again, Alex.
Yeah, perhaps if we, sorry.
All right.
If we can note that that we have the ability to review just to make sure that the public are aware that it's not precluded from being looked at prior to 5 years. Is that a fair call, Pam? Just to, yeah.
That would be great. Thank you.
Let's do that, because at the end of the day, if it provides clarity, then that's what we want to be able to give to our community as well. So can we just add that in, Karen or Suzanne into, yeah, okay, excellent. All right, now we're on the home straight, folks. So just going back to what we were talking about, tourism in particular, and sections of the report that addresses public safety, reducing alcohol-related crime and disorder, and we did have a discussion on that. Are people comfortable that we've had a discussion? Because if we are, what I'd like to do is actually move straight to recommendation 10.
I think we possibly should have a bit more discussion. I don't think we've really been specifically discussing the cycling and tourism. So I think it's important.
Let's have a conversation then. That's excellent. Okay, so seeing as how you've kicked off, Ban, would you like to carry on then with your comments around cycling and tourism? I'm sure that Councillor Eames will have something that he wishes to add to that as well. Good.
Yeah, sure. Well, my thoughts on it, given, and I think we may even have an action item in a committee regarding this. But you know, the comments have been made in going back to our previous burden of proof that we act on evidence and a continuing problem. I still feel that the better than to be looking at bylaws to restrict this is that we work proactively with council officers and with vineyards and cycle companies to come up with a solution before we revert to any sort of bylaw implications. That's my thoughts on that one.
Councillor Eames, what would you like to?
Yes, I'd agree with what Alex is saying, but I'd like to add, we don't need to restrict ourselves to just Martinborough. We are now looking at forming a number of cycleways around the area, stretching beyond our boundaries, and I think we should be sort of thinking big picture tourism. And not just restrict ourselves to the Martin. So maybe consult a bit wider than just the Martinborough Community Board, and look at what the others think about moving on to the new cycleways which we're proposing.
I would agree with that actually, Councillor Eames. I'd go as far to say it's just sometimes not always about cycling. There's a lot of people that for some reason are starting to try and walk between towns, and there's a lot of walking tracks that people are doing after they've, and maybe there needs to be some consideration just around normal movement in that regard. But cycling does produce a slightly different hazard with vehicles actually being on the road with cyclists as well. Councillor Hay, you something you'd like?
I'd agree with you, Garrick. I think the wording should be changed to be inclusive of all of South Wairarapa. And there's events, for example, like the Tweed Run, which was done in Greytown, that didn't involve alcohol, but it's not to say that it might in the future. And I know that when we had a workshop around this, that Hazel and Rick have been particularly proactive in terms of working with providers, and I would just support the already fantastic work you're doing. And certainly in the community, we're getting good feedback from people in the tourism sector around the work you're doing. So I just encourage you to continue that. So
I agree. Fantastic. Now, the recommendation 10 itself is that we support officers' recommendations for investigation into measures to address issues of cyclist safety and care for tourists.
Yeah.
I guess what we're just saying is we want to make sure that that is a district-wide inclusive recommendation, and make a note of that. Okay.
I think, Madam Chair, I think the resolution is just to consider it.
Yes.
As opposed to support it, and yeah.
So are you proposing a change then that it's actually consider officers' recommendations, not supporting officers' recommendations?
I'm unsure why this is a resolution in as much as it's only for us to consider as opposed to make a decision on. Karen?
We've had the discussion in a number of different forums, haven't we, around the specific issue around Martinborough and the vineyard tourism and the potential safety concerns of people who are fueled with a number of glasses of wine on cycles and the need for them. One solution is to separate them from the rest of the traffic. That's one potential solution. And we've had broader discussions around actually what we're talking about is working with all interested stakeholders to address these issues, also broader issues around promoting responsible tourism in Martinborough. So this is specifically to address that. We have talked about it in forums, but we haven't actually moved it forward in order to be able to come on to officers' programme of work. So it's specifically alcohol related because this is the committee that's considering issues around addressing alcohol related harms. But I think that it would be within the committee's recommendation if it did support officers looking at that to do that, but also to add on and to broaden the inquiry into wider safety issues for cyclists. But just in response to Maybane, it's around consider, and then if you feel the need, if you feel that we should be putting it on officers' programme of work, then making that recommendation to council so that it does do so.
Okay, does that answer your question, Maybane, or do you
it does? So then obviously you would wanting direction from this to go to council, and it would then be possibly that it allow or asks council officers to investigate where perceived issues are occurring throughout the South Wairarapa and bring to council's attention for consideration.
That's right.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that. Okay. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to raise in that conversation?
If we're going out into the wider community, do we need to include, the wider, not just Martinborough, the wider district is the word, do we need to bring the 5 Trails team in on those discussions for safety measures and things, as well as our own community boards and councillors?
It's a good question, Pam. I mean, my initial thinking around that is that would be part of the scope of the council officers' report. I would be thinking that they would be part of this conversation is to provide some directions that they would be on that page anyway. Karen, have you got anything you want to add to that? No. Okay. All right.
Yeah, in response, Madam Chair, is I think that would be inherent and expected of council officers. So I think it would be included in that possible recommendation resolution I put forward.
Maybane, I'll just go back to the recommendation that's actually noted in the report, is that we support officers' recommendations for investigation into measures to address issues of cyclist safety and care for tourists. Yeah. Are you still happy with that as a resolution for us to, we could
get Suzanne to read back that more specific resolution that I mentioned. Please don't ask me to repeat it.
Well, I think that's what I was getting to, is that you're probably going to need to repeat it. Yeah.
And I think as we nail that down to, we approve that they do investigate, that the council officers investigate issues as they arise within the South Wairarapa for referring back to council for recommendations.
Yep. So ask officers to investigate perceived issues as they arise throughout the South Wairarapa and bring these to council's attention. That's what I have.
I would move that resolution.
Can I ask a question? If we put as they arise, that means that's going to be an ongoing thing all the time. I think we need to look at being able to predict some of those things that are going to happen in the future and take those into consideration in a one-off of having officers address the situation.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Pam. I think one is investigation of the issues, but the second part to that must be that there's some way that council is working to actually address an ongoing pattern of behaviours, or to be able to implement some kind of work with alcohol vendors.
Yeah, if I could change that resolution to saying identified issues, so that may cover both those.
we'll let you have a go at reading that back then.
I'm not sure where to put that, Alex.
Instead of as they arise, just put identified issues instead of saying investigating issues as they arise.
Okay, so ask officers to investigate perceived issues, identified issues throughout South Waralapa and bring to council's attention.
You could remove the perceived, I think.
To investigate identified issues throughout South Waralapa and bring these to the attention of council. Something's not quite right still, is it?
No, I don't think that actually goes far enough, because the whole purpose of Resolution 10 as it stood was actually to be able to investigate and address an issue. All we're currently looking at with that resolution is that we actually investigate it. We're still not doing anything with the addressing. So I would propose the first part is probably what you've said, Alex, but the second part to it must be that's actually around being able to address those issues.
As long as it's inherent within any alcohol control still comes to council for approval, then I'm fine with that.
Okay. Karen?
Yeah, I think throughout the discussions that I've been party to, there's never been, this is instead of alcohol control. So we've looked at what the issues are and is the alcohol bylaw the appropriate way of doing it. Apart from the ordinary controls around, the licensing provisions, this is just we have a number of different aspects here associated with, that's been raised. And so let's set aside some time, look at what all of the issues are, and then propose some options for dealing with it and report to council on those.
I'm comfortable with that, Karen, and council does have a role in advocacy, and also to promote and improve and protect public health, and public health has got quite a wide-ranging definition. So, look, I think the thing is we identify the issue and then we look to put some measures around it. Okay, so Resolution 10 then now could read. Suzanne, I'll let you start with the first part of Alex's, and then I think we're going to add something to the end. So
we ask officers to investigate identified issues throughout South Waralapa I'm kind of lost jamming all this together, you guys.
All right, I will have a go. We request officers to investigate identified issues
Can we just leave it like it is?
Well, actually, yeah.
Consider officers' recommendation of measures to address issues of cyclist safety and care for tourists in the wider South Wairarapa district.
Yeah, I think that works, Pam. It's the investigation and the element to address and potentially advocate as well. Yep. Maybe that's what we need to put in, advocate. I think that's in that. All right. Okay. One more time.
So where do you want the advocate, Rebecca?
I don't know if we do actually, because if we're saying that we're addressing an issue of cyclist safety and care for tourists, then we're going to, the part of the report will be that we advocate for some measures around that.
Okay, so that would be fairly straightforward then. It's support officers' recommendations for investigation into measures to address issues of cyclist safety and care for tourists in the wider South Wairarapa district.
Perfect. Do I have a motion? Seconded by Councillor Hay. Okay.
Before we vote, we have a comment from Rick, I think.
I was just seeing that.
I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, just in regards to the public safety or cyclist safety, is when you say officers, this is not just restricted to the alcohol unit. This is officers for council. Right. Okay. I just didn't want to go past my jurisdiction on this one.
Good call, Rick. Good call. Okay. So we've moved and seconded. that, can I please have, if all those in favour, would you please show your hand? Thank you. Okay. No one against.
Russell popped up. Did he want to say something in that?
I don't know. He's blanked himself out. Russell, would you, before we declare anything, would you like to get a comment? You're on mute.
No, I wasn't seeking to comment, but thank you, Councillor Colenso. No, I think you've captured it in terms of your refinement of your wording, both for the intent of investigation and the opportunity to encapsulate what solutions or consideration points might be. So I think you've got the wording right. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Russell. Okay. Right, so we've taken a vote. Can I just get a show of hands again for all those in favour of the motion? Excellent. Great. Motion's carried. Now, our last conversation is, and we may well need some comment from our team here. It wasn't part of the statement of proposal, and we didn't consult on whether the bylaw should include a provision to enable council to give permission to consume, bring into, or possess alcohol in an alcohol ban area. The previous bylaw did include a provision that permitted an exemption, and other council bylaws also make similar provisions. So I'm assuming that you guys have all read this and that you understand, what this might mean. But what I'm keen to do is have a conversation with our team around whether they think that, or just some commentary. But before we do that, I've got one question that I want to ask, and just have we ever had a problem in the past where this exemption was in place in the previous bylaw? Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm being clear with that, Karen.
And I think Rick would be best to answer whether there's ever actually been an application. So, for example, it would be in relation to Featherston CBD, I expect. Rick and Hazel aware of that?
I can't recall any instances where we've had to grant any special permission around it. Anything's been covered by a special licence as far as I'm aware.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you. All right. Team, do you have any questions around that you want to ask of Karen or Rick or Hazel? Mayor Bayan, you're off mute, picking that you do.
No, so Councillor Colenso, I think, had something before me.
Okay, and then we'll have Councillor Eames after. Councillor Colenso.
I just wondered, Rick and Hazel, you can probably answer this, as to how difficult, if you've got an alcohol ban on it and you let somebody bring some BYO or alcohol into an area that had a ban, how hard would that be, A, to police, and what would be the perceived perception of that from the other people? I just can't quite get my head around why you would do that.
I'm hoping Rick will jump in on that one, but I can try and answer it if he doesn't.
I'm not quite sure I understood the question, but I'm thinking that if, say for argument's sake, we had a ban in the Martiborough Square and a family wanted to have a picnic and went there, assuming they didn't see the signage, is that the question you're alluding to, Councillor?
Yeah, basically, I think it is, Rick. Yeah. So if you had an event like Toast Martinborough, for example, where you've got a ban over the whole area, and you gave somebody, or somebody had permission that was bringing BYO into that area, how would that be dealt with, and how can you, when you've got a ban in place, how can you give a license for somebody to bring alcohol into a banned area?
So for the Toast one, it would, because they're on a specific date, we would hope that we wouldn't be confused and grant two licenses on the one place.
Sure.
In terms of if it's any sort of formal event type scenario, whether that's a wedding reception, a reunion or something in a specific public space, they would still need to apply for a special license through us. The scenario would be if it was a visitor to Martiborough that just wanted to go into a picnic scenario, one hopes that the signage was visible enough that it would indicate that that's not an area they could have. So the other scenarios I could see, if there was a Christmas event at Martiborough, they wanted a New Year's celebration or something, and we had sort of in the scenario where we might have had a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. ban, so a nighttime ban, we could give an exemption as a special event to override that liquor ban for that area for that specific event. I think legally I'm in the right ballpark there, Karen.
So in saying that, because we don't have any areas with a permanent ban in place, then this is not going to actually affect anything, is it?
Karen, you've got a comment?
Yeah, so just to wind back a little bit, just to be clear, this was part of the statement of proposal, or what part of the statement of proposal we said that we didn't propose to include a council permission. So it was addressed in the statement of proposal and we didn't receive any comments on it. And I think actually, Councillor Colenso, it was you that raised with us the potential for, if we did have a 24/7 or a nighttime ban, for example, in the Martinborough Square, would that then mean that we couldn't have a special permission to say that, you know, people couldn't bring their own wine? And without a special permission, we wouldn't be able to have that. There would be no dispensation for that, for the event, because as Rick has pointed out, if it's an event and there's the supply of alcohol, sale and supply of alcohol, then that would be covered by a special license, but the special license wouldn't cover BYO. And so we'd have to seriously think about, you know, what was the need in the first place to put the alcohol ban in place? Would giving a special permission undermine that need, or would we be able to deal with any alcohol related harm or disorder potentially through working with an event organiser? And I think, Councillor Colenso, that's exactly the type of event or instance that we may consider a permission. I agree with Rick. If we've got Toast Martinborough and we've got an alcohol ban in place, I think it would be highly unlikely that we would give a special permission to somebody to bring BYO in, because it just undermines the whole purpose of having the alcohol ban. So that was why we didn't include it in the statement of proposal, is that there are very narrow examples of when we may have a good enough reason to provide permission, and at the moment we don't have any of those alcohol ban areas. But if we don't include that within the mechanism of the bylaw, we can't include that for the future. So if we wanted to do that, we would then have to amend the bylaw in order to be able to do it. So it's really just gazing into the future. Would there possibly be any reason that we want to do that? We've identified that maybe there would be, and so if that's sufficiently justified, then we can include the council permission in there. But it would always be discretionary. We'd always need to have that really good evidence, and that it wasn't undermining the purpose of the ban in the first place. I hope that answers all of the questions.
Sorry, thank you.
Councillor Eames?
No, I'm still confused, because we're only going to have one place with an alcohol ban, and that's Martinborough Square for one day a year. We'd have to impose another ban on another area to get to a situation where this would happen, which I think at the moment is unlikely. And if we are, we're going to have to go through another amendment. So I can't exercise my mind to think of where this could possibly happen. Sorry.
So currently not, because we don't have any permanent alcohol bans, but we do have the provision to make a permanent alcohol ban within the bylaw. So possibly 2 years down the track, we may decide, actually, the Martinborough Square, we may have problems there. We do want to put an alcohol ban in. So then we put an alcohol ban in under the bylaw, and then we wouldn't be able to say, we'll give special permission for an event to actually override the ban. So it's future gazing.
Yeah.
I think
very, very similar to
we're
Garrick.
digging ourselves a wee hole here, I think.
Garrick, it's my turn now. You've said it. But very much, if we were going to put another liquor ban in, could it be considered as part of that liquor ban special conditions as opposed to having an overarching resolution at this point?
Not my understanding. Perhaps Rick can jump in, because of course special conditions apply and special provisions apply to sale and supply of alcohol, so it wouldn't cover BYO.
Right. So really it's just to give you flexibility in the future. That's all this is.
That's exactly right. But if we don't feel we need the flexibility, then we can leave it out.
We don't need know if we need that flexibility.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. We don't. And I think the purpose of having the bylaw is to look to what we've currently got, but to have a bit of a future state focus as well. And this actually allows the provision for that, so that if things do change in the future or we need to, we've got a mechanism for it without unduly having to rework everything that we've done.
It avoids that possibility of having the law as an arse sort of comment where the council has no flexibility to be reasonable, possibly.
Good, cool. And I think this bylaw actually is quite reasonable as it's proposed. It does still allow a lot of freedoms, which is good for the community, and also does provide some safeguards as well, which is the purpose of it. Councillors, do you have any other questions that you would like to ask of the team? Or Karen, do you have any other comments? And Councillor Eames, are you sufficiently still needing to exercise, or are you okay with what's been proposed?
Yes, I have a very Catholic approach to this. I can actually engage with anyone.
Okay, right. Okay then. Well, I think then we potentially can come to the point where we've had a conversation about the exemption to the bylaw, and so I would like to move that we include a provision, or to include a provision to enable council to give permission to consume, bring into, or possess alcohol in an alcohol ban area, as stated in paragraph 3.7 of the proposed alcohol control bylaw report. Do I have a seconder for that? Mia Bayan, thank you. Everyone in agreement? Please raise your hand. The motion is carried. Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of the conversation around this particular bylaw. I'd like to thank everybody for their time. Some really, really good, robust conversation there, and very much a big thanks to our team for their incredibly valuable input in interpreting some law for us, giving us some additional information, which is always helpful with these conversations. So any comments to wrap up at all? Otherwise, I will call this meeting closed.
I just comment that we're 5 hours early.
Yay!
You can do another one for us, Rebecca. Come back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Well
All
done.
right. Thanks everybody for their time, and big thanks to our council